shows you what's happening. And these photos are taken, I take them every month to show the progress that we're making to our lenders and that sort of thing. So that's about every other month. Over here, there's a couple of things we brought. This was with the mall open and before downtown at the Gardens came and Legacy came and before we did the flyover and anything. I told Steve he can have this photograph. And this is a photograph that shows just when the earthwork was starting here. I was going to leave these photographs here, a couple aerials for you. This is this one shows the old. If you remember, we used to have I thought it was the Columbus Day Festival, but Steve corrected me. Steve or Rick corrected me and said it's really the Italian festival.
The Italian festival we have there, right?
And this shows when it was set up here in the cultural site across from the mall down by where Burdines used to be. And here's just I think this is just a beautiful, gives you a perspective of the proximity of the ocean. And this is before downtown Gardens went in. Gossman buildings out here, Legacy's just starting, so you can have those. And a couple things that I left a plaque there that was on one of the columns in the center court of the wall that we remodeled. We took that down, so I brought that over for what it's worth.
Just one other thing, the Artie Grove was on that property also, the second, third, fourth years.
Yeah, the Artie Grove was there, and then it moved to Gardens Boulevard. We used to close off Gardens Boulevard behind the mall. And then once the residential started, we couldn't do it. So we've got something we're going to show here, which is, but before we show it, Steve and Rick are going to talk about the whole process. Is that right?
No, I think we're going to show
Oh,
the first
okay.
part first, and then we'll go back.
We'll show you a part of a video that I didn't put together, and I have no idea how to run it. That's why I'm standing over here. Total disclaimer.
You're blaming me.
I thought it was a PowerPoint presentation, but it's not. But it'll show some of the early part of it shows the promotion that we made to the MacArthur Foundation because they had a competition to select a developer to develop this mall. And Steve and Rick will speak about that. So this is some of the early stuff, and then it leads into some of the early promotions that we showed to prospective tenants. And it talks about the area, the demographics, and how it's growing and that sort of thing. And you'll see some old photographs of the area from 25 years ago and that sort of thing. And then we'll talk with you and we'll give you a briefing on how this whole thing came together. And then we've got, Rick or Steve will pick this back on, and God willing. And we'll show some pictures of the grand opening event, the grand opening party that we had at the mall.
Black tie.
That's right, the black tie.
George Benson.
With George Benson. And I did write down a couple of his tunes, although he's what, maybe you know who he is, because I couldn't remember what was, he had the number one thing at the time.
And he was the second choice. He was the first choice.
What did I tell you? Whitney Houston.
Jimmy Butler.
But
Whitney
George
Houston.
Benson, I think, was a better choice, given what's happening with Whitney Houston.
Ready?
This is about 8 minutes, I'm guessing, 8, 9 minutes, so.
York, Beverly Hills.
Is that it, Tom? Yep.
Presents the gardens of Super Regional Retail Development, strategically located on Beachy Boulevard in Palm Beach County, on the Gold Coast of Florida. For more than a quarter of a century, Forbes Cohen Properties has built a solid reputation in the shopping center industry through total commitment to every facet of the business, from design and leasing to management and marketing. Creating successful retail environments is as much art as science, and Forbes Cohen's philosophy utilizes the best in creative thinking, coupled with careful planning and attention to detail. Each Forbes Cohen mall is designed and tenanted to achieve a unique quality of visual excitement with a customer comfort level that assures return visits. Designed with each individual market in mind, Forbes Cohen malls become the focal point for both shopping and community activity. Headquartered in their own development, Forbes Cohen's corporate offices are located in the first phase of their magnificent 1.8 million square foot Galleria Office Center in Southfield, Michigan. Through these examples of past successes, and from what you're about to learn of their future plans, it is easy to understand why Forbes Cohen Properties is certainly becoming the trendsetter in an extremely competitive industry. Forbes Cohen Properties is now tapping into one of the most vital retail markets in the country, the Gold Coast of Florida. The Gold Coast offers a healthy, diversified economic base, which includes multi-billion-dollar high-tech industries, as well as aviation, construction, and tourism. Regional and corporate headquarters are springing up throughout the area as both national and Florida-based firms recognize its enormous potential. As a result, the employment rate is growing at more than double the U.S. average, and it is predicted that this trend will continue through 1990. In the last 10 years alone, Palm Beach County has experienced a 70.1% employment increase. In terms of population, the Gardens trade area is also growing at a phenomenal rate of 2,000 people a month. According to the U.S. Commerce Department, the MSA population is rising at 4 times the national average and is projected to increase 61.3% by the year 2000. There are thousands of new building permits being issued every month and nearly 100,000 new residential units, 70% of which are in a 7-mile radius of the Garden site. By 1995, a gain of 92.3% in primary market households is expected. In addition, current residents enjoy the highest average household income in the state, and when combined with the steady influx of young, upwardly mobile professionals projected to have the highest buying power in the state by 1990, there clearly exists a shopper goods potential in excess of $1 billion. For retailers, this provides a market that outsells every other Florida market in per capita retail sales and ranks 3rd in the nation. Now, let's take a closer look at this affluent Gold Coast community. Palm Beach County offers an active outdoor lifestyle. Not only can it boast being the golf capital of the world, but it also offers sporting events such as polo, racing, and highlight, as well as year-round boating, swimming, water skiing, tennis, scuba diving, and fishing. In addition, a wide variety of cultural and social events are supported by avid shopping habits, as evidenced by the boom in retail development throughout the area. And where do these upscale shoppers live? In beautiful beachfront condominiums, scenic lake homes, and lush garden apartments. The Gold Coast market ranks first among Florida's major markets in percent of owner-occupied homes, and first in the nation for owner-occupied condominium units. But year-round residents aren't the only ones who'll be shopping. New inland second home developments and coastal resort-oriented communities attract affluent winter residents and over 2 million tourists to the area year after year, contributing over $1 billion to the economy. In fact, Palm Beach County residents and visitors' generous spending habits have boosted retail sales a healthy 213% over the past 10 years. It all adds up to a premier location for one of Forbes Cohen Properties' most exciting projects ever, the Gardens. Built on over 100 acres in Florida's wealthiest county, the Gardens will serve as the cornerstone of a 450-acre planned development to include hotels, offices, residential properties, convention and civic facilities, and a cultural park. Located on PGA Boulevard at alternate A1A, adjacent to the I-95 interchange, and only 4 minutes from US 1 and the Florida Turnpike, the Gardens is easily accessible from the entire trade area. Anchored by Macy's, Burdines, and Sears, with the proposed addition of Saks Fifth Avenue and Bloomingdale's, the Gardens promises to be one of the most prominent centers in the country, with over 200 stores, restaurants, and trend-setting boutiques. In their search for excellence, Forbes Cohen conducted a cross-country search to identify the most respected national and independent retailers to complement the Gardens' exclusive local entrepreneurs, including a sprinkling of international concepts. Thus, this select group of merchants will enhance the mystique of the Palm Beach shopping address. The Gardens is designed to appeal to the upscale Palm Beach community with its dramatic architecture and natural landscaping. Sculpted arches signal promenades with soaring glass storefronts that will lead shoppers into a tropical atmosphere of giant palms, flowered terraces, sparkling fountains, and quiet ponds. All enhanced by Florida sunshine streaming in through a series of interconnecting skylights, surrounded by mirrors and Tivoli lighting. A central stage area will provide the Gardens the opportunity to host the performing arts and community activities. Dining will be fashionable, with innovative restaurants spilling onto colorful patios near each entrance, and exciting skylit garden cafes in a terraced atrium setting. Capturing the subtle flavor of southern Florida in a design of contemporary elegance, the Gardens will showcase today's newest store concepts and most exciting merchandising philosophies at a prestigious shopping address. The tenant mix has been carefully conceived to reflect the Palm Beach affluence, while including a broad range of price points with emphasis on style, quality, and originality, all at levels that cannot be duplicated by any other center in the trade area. From its extraordinary combination of anchors and trend-setting boutiques to its dramatic architecture and superb amenities, the Gardens will truly be one of a kind. The Gardens, Palm Beach County, Florida, developed by Forbes Cohen Properties. Opening date, fall 1988.
Go ahead,
Well,
Director.
let me give a little background, and that's really an interesting tape, and there's a second half of that tape that you'll find even more interesting.
Why don't you take the seats, guys?
Pardon?
Why don't you take the seats?
Okay.
That's what we set them up there for.
Okay, we thought we were going to be informal here.
Do it, Jay Leno.
I was going to talk a little bit, just very briefly, about MacArthur.
Is it the thing for most of it?
The history of the Gordon Small can't be told without understanding the history of John D. MacArthur and the MacArthur Foundation. Most of you probably have heard the story before, but I'll tell very briefly. After making his first millions in the insurance business in Chicago, Mr. Mack came to Florida in the 50s and began to acquire vast amounts of land. He acquired over 100,000 acres in Florida, not just in Palm Beach County. He also had land holdings in Dade, Broward, Martin, St. Lucie County, Sarasota County. But the core properties were here in northern Palm Beach County. So in 1959, Mr. Mack started and incorporated the city of Palm Beach Gardens. And as you probably know, we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the city this year. Actually, it was June. The city's going to have a celebration in November, I think. We hope. In 1960, the U.S. Census showed the population of the city of Palm Beach Gardens as 1, which is a very interesting fact. But John D. MacArthur had a vision for the city, even early back in the 60s. He had a vision that this would someday become a city of young families in excess of 50,000 residents, a place for people to work and play. To create his vision, he started bringing businesses to Palm Beach Gardens. If some of you were here a month or two ago when Sherman Adler talked about the television productions that were done here, he brought RCA here into Palm Beach Gardens. The PGA of America came to Palm Beach Gardens. Mr. MacArthur started to do some real estate development, started some subdivisions in the 60s, had a parade of homes, but he didn't fully get to see his vision realized because he died in 1978. And when Mr. Mack died, most of his estate went to fund the MacArthur Foundation, which is an international philanthropic organization. And the MacArthur Foundation in the late 70s and in the early 80s, through its local office, which was then known as Bankers Land Company, later became Foundation Land Company, began to master plan the remainder of the holdings of Palm Beach Gardens. And we're door, because Rick can talk more about this, to do comprehensive planning. I think, Don, you were on the council at the time when we did all the master planning and worked on the new comprehensive land use plan. Shortly after John D. MacArthur's death, the MacArthur Foundation got a little bit into the development business. We did developments such as Steeplechase, which is right next door. We sold the land immediately after Mr. Mack's death for what later became PGA National. In the early 80s, we sold a couple of other properties, which became Admiral's Cove and Frenchman's Creek. So after Mr. Mack...
It's Disney.
That's the second part of the tape, which we'll see shortly. Bottom line is, we set the bar very high after Mr. MacArthur's death. And so the foundation soon realized that it needed to have a central core for downtown area in Palm Beach Gardens. And we identified that 450-acre site that you see on this map over here, bounded by alternate A1A on the west, bounded on the south by PGA Boulevard, bounded on the north by Cabana Colony, and actually goes all the way across Bernie Farms Road with the exception of the, Meadows Mobile Home Park. At 450 acres, we identified as a site for a multi-use, mixed-use planned unit development, actually a DRI, which is what they call a development of regional impact. At the same time that we applied for the application for the development approval, the foundation began a national search, a national competition for a mall developer. And the rest is history. Forbes Cove was the successful mall developer that we chose. We worked very closely with them. And with that, I'll let Rick fill in a little bit more.
Okay, I'm a planner, so I'm going to give you a little bit different perspective here. Let's see. Okay, this is and highlighted the background is a current aerial, but I've highlighted in yellow kind of things that were going on and back in 1980 when the whole idea of the downtown, the city of Palm Beach Gardens was first contemplated. We had some big thinkers back then. There was a guy named Bill Finley and a guy named Mort Hoppenfeld and a guy named another fellow, and they all worked in Columbia, Maryland, and they came up with a project called Columbia, Maryland, which was a big, very successful community in Columbia. And they had all worked there for like 20 years, and they were hired by the foundation to come play on the northern Palm Beach County area. So back in the early 80s, when I first was hired, I had these internationally known guys that we were working with, and they were well recognized in the development business and planning business and everything else. And then they hired more smart guys, and they kind of said in the beginning, well, you guys have started this with here, with JDM and PJ National, and you have this other area called Johnson's Landing up here. Let's make this a very high-end corridor along here. So they looked at Admiral's Cove and Frenchman's Creek and everything. So we have all this income and everything. You're going to have all this wealth here. So you need to do a really top-notch shopping center. And they said you can't be middle of the road, because at that time, in the early 80s, we had a DeBartolo, which was the developer, you heard his name. He had average malls, and he already had a plan for the corner of the PJ and A1A. And the guys I was over, he said, no, we're not going to do that. We don't want, that's too low class for us. We don't want a DeBartolo mall, we want a higher class mall. So based on that, whoops, we looked at this piece of property, and you'll see that from a planning standpoint, most malls are located right down here in the corner. You know, most malls are located at the intersection of two major roads. And they said, well, that's not going to work. We don't want it right on the corner. We want to build around it. So this is an early photograph, which kind of Tom had, which shows you the old drainage canals. Right here is the community college. Here's the old courthouse, the driver's license bureau. You can see the post office wasn't built yet. This is the beginnings of Mini-Macy Home Park, and we had cows on this land. back in 1980, there's Thomas Morrison's here.
I see a
And
few.
what?
That's where we are.
That's it. And here's Cabana Colony in the north, which started in the early 60s. And this area right here, I was starting to head back here, this area here was an old sand dune. And it's a remnant sand dune system, goes up and down the coast, and there were huge dunes there, like 30, 40, 50 feet in the air. And all those dunes were moved, and Big Lake was put there. We kind of like did the opposite, where the land was the highest, we dug it down the deepest where the lake is, so that's where downtown gardens and all.
That's why they're called planters.
Yeah, that's right. And this is the old drainage system, which I talked about, okay, which was kind of there from the late 70s and everything else. The first plan, this is Steve had mentioned of the original plan, which this is a drawing I did like back in 1980. And at that point, this is where the mall is, and it was a different type of mall. Look, it's a square here, and there were 80 acres, and we had these two front out parcels, and we had a road going across like this, and other than that, it's kind of built this the way it was on the plan and everything else, but the square configuration didn't work out for any of the developers. As Steve said, we did in like 1983, we did a developer competition. I did this, we sent proposals out to like a half a dozen developers, of which 3 or 4 responded, and I can't think of their names right now. The 3 losers, but we had 3 highly respected people. The Forbes people were the new kids on the block at that point, because they were kind of like nobody really knew who they were, because they had malls in Michigan area, but these other guys had a national reputation.
Rick, what are the malls that they do in Michigan? Do you know?
Sorry?
I can tell you.
You know, the Somerset collection, in Detroit, or it's
But I remember meeting the Forbes people for the very first time, because I met them at the entryway when we had our competition. They all had a presentation. And they all sat around the table. It was like they all were choreographed, because they all had the 7 or 8 people, Becky and Jim Bixby and Tom York and Sid Morey. It was all kind of like they really came off well at the very beginning. You know, they kind of like all the guys came in. I met them all, but they kind of like whatever time we'd sit, we go, whoever was talking stopped, because that was kind of like a code word they had, I think, at that time. So that meeting was very, I remember that. And then, so that's the way the plan was approved. This is the old master plan, in that by 1980, you see these little slivers that were added on. This is a little detail. The Forbes company wanted to expand the site of the site to 80 acres and 90 acres wasn't enough. It needed to be a minimum of 100. And so we eliminated the frontage road and gave access to these off an internal easement. And we expanded them all. It's going to be like, I want to say like 900,000 or 1 million square feet in the beginning, and it ended up at 1.3 million square feet. So they increased it by 200,000 square feet because it was so successful. And that's all I have. And who do you want me to go, Tom?
the one that shows the drainage canal, you know,
Okay.
this one here instead. And you see that canal that's running in from left to right and down and goes under PGA Boulevard, and then it turns and goes back again and goes north. And what you'll see in the later renderings is the lake system that were put on site, because over in, is it Monet Gardens? Monet Acres?
1 acres, yeah.
Monet Acres. They had, prior to the mall being built, they had a big flooding problem. So that this was, I think it's probably South Florida Water Management District, kind of dictated what had to be done as part of the development to relieve that. That sand pile, what we did when we built the mall is we had to demuck. There weren't any sinkholes, but there was a lot of muck on the site. We had to clear all that out, and we moved 1.25 million cubic yards of that sand over to the site to build up the mall site, and that's what you see in some of the earlier footage.
We clarified before the mall development, that canal, didn't that drainage go from the west, down, set out across
Down.
PJ, loop down, and then come back up?
And come back, and you can see it right there, the canal coming back up and
So
going
the
to
drainage
north.
went down.
Down under
from
PGA and then
Couch
back.
and then
Back up and under PGA again.
Yeah, one other thing we had to do is right in this area here, we had 110 gopher tortoises. And it was my job, this was the first time, as one of the development order conditions of zoning approvals, was we had to relocate the gopher tortoises. We hired a guy, I remember his name was Russell Burke. He was a biologist, just graduating from University of Florida. And he came down, and Russ came down, and he trapped all 110 gopher tortoises. And he did it very simply. He would dig a hole in front of the burrow, and he put a 5-gallon bucket and put some leaves over the top of it, and branches, and the gopher tortoises walk out, they fall in the hole, he come and get them out of the bucket, okay? And then, this is the high-tech part, he put a radio collar on them, okay? And then moved them someplace. I forget where.
Somebody else's property.
Somebody else's property. And then he had to go back and study it for several years. That was his master's project. And I remember Russ, because he kind of reminded me of the tortoises. The little kid, like 8 pounds, you know.
He spoke highly of you.
And anyways, that was the first time they began, that was at the time when they began doing science on the gopher tortoises and everything else. And then one other point I just wanted to make was that the Canary Island date palms, you know, the original plan, you know, is we have, at the corners here, we have these very expensive and very nice Canary Island date palms. And that was an idea that sort of came off from a fellow named Howard Ostad after he made a trip out to Phoenix, Arizona, and saw these nice Phoenix date palms. They grow very well in the desert because they're a desert plant. Here, they were very expensive. They were like $25,000 a piece. And a guy named Roy Rude, who had owned Rude Landscaping up in Cuesta, went all over the state to Tampa, and he would go around and they would buy these trees from the front yards of people because they had to be big trees. And they had guys that would just drive around, they'd see somebody's tree in their front yard, and they'd go offer them $5,000 or $6,000 for it. And then they would come and they would dig it up, and then they created a really nice big plant nursery right there. And we had like 100 of them, Tom, do you remember how many there were?
He had, it was 240.
240.
But
And
the price is-
$25,000 a pop.
The price.
And they all died.
They-
Well, most of them died.
They were back in the day, we were paying $7,000 a piece for them.
Okay.
But
I exaggerated a little bit. I'm sorry, you know.
260 of them. So it came to $1.8 million just for the Canary Island Date Fund. But the interesting thing about it is Rude had hired some brokers to go and buy these things. And as Rick says, a lot of them are from Sarasota and Naples and that area over there. And they drive down the street and they go to someone's house and ask if they would care to sell a tree. And, you know, they buy the tree from them and they write them a check and say, you know, we'll get the truck coming over next week, we'll come and we'll dig it up, and then drive on. But there were 3 brokers working the area. So that afternoon or the next day, another broker would show up and, would you care to sell that tree?
They sold the same tree.
They sold the same tree, they bought the same tree several times.
So I was right, it worked for you.
Well, and you're right, so maybe it did get up there. But some of those people that had made out very well off of that, and they learned after a while that they dig the tree as soon as they can check.
How many are still alive now?
Well, there's some of them, there's what are they, Ganoderma or something?
Ganoderma.
An airborne disease that we got involved in, we brought the University of Florida down, and we were gonna do a whole research project, but we ended up changing the species, so the ones you see out there that are really fat are the original ones, and the ones that are a little thinner are the ones that aren't so fat.
Yeah, and in the end, the city has the downtown, okay? In the end, we have a cultural place with movie theaters, we have a great shopping center, great mall, we have jobs, we have healthcare, we have lots of residences up here. So it's worked out, you know, 20 years later.
Well, a few other things that Rick was very much involved in was through the DRI process. As you're going through and getting approval for, well, DRI, as Rick said, is Development of Regional Impact. And when you do one of those projects, the state makes you go in and take into consideration everything that has to be done within the area that you're going to impact. And that includes the roads and God knows what else, but primarily the roads, the police, the fire stations, that sort of thing. So this project, this 450 acres, got saddled with a few things. We got saddled, the foundation saddled us with building the fire station on campus, but you had to put up the land for it
Right.
at no cost to the city.
Fire station right there.
And then, along with that was the road widening, which was part of the DRI process. So what we did is we went out and did that work ourselves. We had it designed and bid and awarded, and the county had assigned, the county and the state had assigned a dollar value to that. So as we built the improvements, we took credits for those dollars against our traffic impact fees. And I like to think that you're always better off having the developer do those rather than the city, because we want them done. We want them done before we open the project. The state and the counties know them, not so much.
Tom, who's the biggest taxpayer in the city?
The biggest taxpayer is the garden home.
And how much, which generates more sales income tax for the city?
I would expect it's the garden home. We have 3 Starbucks, all go down to.
Starbucks.
As you can see one from the.
Is that how you measure these things?
What is, you know what the tax bill is?
I'd rather not say. So that kind of wraps that up. So the competition, I think the reason that Forbes won it was because of our attention to detail. Sid Forbes, those of you that know him, and his son Nate Forbes, Nate's now the managing partner in business. They're very, very hands-on people. They spend a lot of time and a lot of attention to detail. They attend all the design meetings, and they have veto rights over everything that architects do. We're a small company. We only do these jobs one at a time. Each mall that we design, each retail property that we design, is designed to fit in the community and to serve the demographics. A lot of as you go in the mall, you'll see new tenants all the time. That's because the demographics are changing. The customer base in the city today isn't what the customer base in the city was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. The tenant mix that we had, we opened originally with Macy's, Burdines, and Sears, and then we're fortunate enough to add Saks Fifth Avenue and Bloomingdale's, and that was, and Sid Forbes is the one that sold those majors, all majors, department stores, and coming to the site, and it's the only center in the United States that has those mix of tenants. And that was a real tough sell for them, because those of you that have been here for a while know that I-95 ended at PGA Boulevard. You go out and say, well, we're opening in 1988, one's 95, well, that's opening in 88 also. Well, we'll kind of take a pass and, wait until after that road opens and see how things are going. So it was really a tough deal. It deserves a lot of credit for putting that together, to get that mix of anchors. As well as the inline tenants and the food court tenants. And we try to come up with a very unique mix of inline tenants. And we try to have about 30-40% of in all our centers, of the inline, what we call the inline tenants, the mall tenants, to be unique to the area. So you won't find them within our trade district. And in the food court, we don't have a McDonald's, we just added a Subway area there. But in Chick-fil-A, we have Chick-fil-A because Chick-fil-A is the best chicken sandwich. And but typically we go with the locals and more of a trendy type of bistro tenant in our food courts, as well as our restaurants. We've got Brio in here, Brio in all of our centers now, because they're fresh, they're wholesome, they're very regional. P.F. Chang's we put in, they were very trendy, and they still do very well. California Pizza Kitchen in the food court is a good adjacency to the food court tenants, because they're really not a standalone tenant, but they do belong in the food court area. The original development, following up on what Rick and Steve said, is the design phase, the site design. The foundation when they dictated the size of it, Rick showed you it was square, it really didn't work for us, and it really didn't work for any mall developers. When we finish this talk tonight, you know, you're all going to be qualified to be mall developers. Run right out and find yourself 100 acres and go to town. But the foundation, rightly so, reserved the front parcels on PJ Boulevard for themselves, because typically when we go into a development that we have in Orlando at Mall of Millennia, we're the first ones in. We create the atmosphere, the ambiance in the center, and we create the value to the residual property. Here we're part of 450 acres. In Millennia, we're in Orlando, we're part of about 500 acres. But we created the value for the out parcels because we set the bar very high, and therefore the landowner can get more money for his land because we're there, we're the first ones in. And that's kind of what the department stores do to us, as they say, Mr. Developer, we know you can't build that all without department stores, so we want a great deal. So if you want the right department stores, you're going to have to help the department stores along. Designing this, get back to the design of the site. The site is designed, and we're one of the first people to do this, that we balance the site. We've got upper and lower parking that's pretty well balanced, 50-50. So you can walk into the upper floor, because if you don't do that, developers have a real hard time leasing the upper level. No one wants to be on the upper level. Not here. Some of our best stores are on the upper level. As well as the food court. The food court's up there, and that's always a big draw. So you get people upstairs to do that. We've got about 6,500 parking spaces over there, and they're almost 50-50 split. The site drainage and retention we talked about in the flooding of Monet Gardens. The way the site is, the mall site is graded, it actually flows out to 4 of those different lake systems that are all around the regional centers. Those lakes are all maintained at different elevations. The one by downtown the Gardens is maintained at elevation 9.5, and then you get over by Miraflores, and that's maintained at elevation 7.5. And Bloomingdale's, I think, is about 6, 4, and it works on down, and eventually ends up, after the detention, ends up in those.
One thing I want to interject here, Tom skipped over a phase. There were many changes during the building of the mall, the design of the mall. You know, they started out with one design and then a different design. Usually, people are downgrading it. You know, people come with lofty ideas, but the execution is down here. Well, you know, with them, and I was working for the foundation there. The expectation went up. I mean, they promised this, but delivered this, because the final product was much higher in quality and tenant space than what they had talked about way back in 1985, when they opened in 1988. It was much better. So.
And I remember hearing that from a lot of people. The original brochure we had with the renderings that you saw in some of this marketing material here, and people look at it and they go, well, yeah, that's just a pretty picture.
Yeah.
What you're going to deliver. Well, but we did deliver, and I think we delivered a little more than that. Some of the things that we talked about, the runoff, we had to bring seacoast utilities throughout the site, running the water and the sewer lines to serve the whole site, as well as the roadway system. And the foundation at that time wasn't allowed to do development work, so it was kind of a wink and a nod, but I don't know whether we awarded the contracts or not, but it's kind of like we were taking the lead in some of that stuff. We had FP&L bury the lines, put them underground on PJ Boulevard and throughout the site, and that was, you pay a differential cost for that. Florida Power and Light will bring you power for free overhead. If you want it underground, there's the differential cost to pay. Put it underground, difference cost. That alone is $1 million. But that's just every quality project. And today it's kind of typical. Every quality project is that. And we also paid for redundant service so that we are fed from 2 or 3 different substations. So if a squirrel jumps into a transformer and knocks out a substation, or a car drives into it or something, there's an automatic throwover switch which feeds us from another substation so that the mall continues to have power. Remember when Saks came in, they didn't want to pay for a throwover switch. was only a $30,000 to $35,000 option that you put in your transformer bulb. And then on December 24th, one year, there was a power outage in Saxton and Thrower Surge. And they worked all day Christmas. The building design started out as being a Mediterranean, modern, Meisner-esque type of thing to kind of blend in with what the architecture at the time was. Borrow a little bit from North Avenue, some of the Palm Beach and Seminole and that area. A lot of the stuff still today is Spanish. I remember talking about, I think the Gospel building was originally going to be pink granite, and it was like, oh, we don't need any more pink, we're going to go for its own. The whole town's turning pink, so kind of got away from that. Our architects are from up north, and we hadn't done a job in Florida before, although I lived here. And initially, the architect had designed vestibules at the wall, and I said, well, Florida, you don't do vestibules. Worry about the cold and not getting the snow out your boots and that sort of thing. So with that, we did the added expense. We put these covered glass canopies outdoors. Mall design was, the year after it opened, it won the ICS, that's the International Council of Shopping Centers, the best new shopping center in the world over 1 million square feet. Construction took a year to design the mall. The site work started before the architectural design was complete. We allowed 2 months for approval and permits and bidding. Fortunately, back in the day, you could get all those approvals in about 2 months. Not from the Corps of Engineers or South Florida or anything, but you could get it from the city back then. And we had 20 months for construction, and we opened right when we thought we were going to open it. And part of that was when we pulled the building permit, Jack Hansen was the building official. Jack, he was up there with the city hall was up on the hill, and he came walking in with about 400 pounds of plans and dropped them on his desk. And I said, when can I have a permit? He said, when do you need it? And I said, well, I want to get started as soon as we can. He says, tell you what, he says, you're going to be digging the foundations for a while, and then you'll just be putting the re-steel. And I said, yeah. He said, okay. He said, you're allowed. You go do that. He said, I'll have you a building permit by next week. So when we got started, I talked to Jack about who the building inspector was going to be, and how they send them out. Usually they send out an inspector. You have one inspector for the structural work, another inspector for the electrical, and for the plumbing, and this and that. But I went to Jack, and he had a fellow over there that was qualified to do all those inspections. And I said, tell you what, we need an inspector for that. We can't be waiting for these inspections. John Orr was the city manager at the time. We got together and we said, I'll tell you what. He said, we got someone we can put on the job, but you'll have to reimburse us for the salary. And I said, well, that's what we pay our building permit fee for, but if that's what it's going to take, that's going to be worthwhile. We have all these tenants coming in, they all need inspections and everything, we're going to be kind of crazy. I said, you're going to be busy ever. And it was fine. And so we set up a trailer on site for the on-site inspector, put a plan table and a water cooler. A couple days after that started, I got a call from Jack Hansen. He said, well, I need to meet with my inspector out there. I said, Jack, no problem. He said, we're just doing the foundations, only working 3-4 hours a day doing inspections, so you can have whatever you need to work on. He says, well, I want to see him over here, I need to meet him over here. I said, well, he said, no, you don't understand. He needs to come over here to meet with me. I said, yeah, that's fine. He said, well, how's he going to get over here? I said, oh, well, what should he be driving, Jack? Jack said, well, he should be driving a Chevy Blazer. I said, oh, what color should that Chevy Blazer be? He said, well, it should be white. I said, yeah, okay, Jack. He says, call me when it comes in. He says, I'll send Public Works over to put the sticker on the door. So we did that. It worked out great having him there. Towards the end of the job, when the hundreds of tenants were dropping their plans off, and they were having a tough time keeping up with it. Don, if you remember, the building department had an inside corner as you walked in, a table, laying an inside corner, and Jack called me over and said, you know, you're killing us over here. I said, I told you you were killing me. He said, I don't have room for the plans. I said, yeah, I told you. He says, I need more room. I said, what are you telling me, Jack? He says, well, look at this sketching. He had built in that outside corner. I said, that's nice. I said, but, you know, I can't do this. I'm too busy. He said, well, I got someone to do it. I just need someone to pay for it. Wow. He says, and when we do this, he said, you may as well close downstairs because the police department needs more room too. And do that. I said, fine, just do it. Send me the bills, do your progress payments, whatever. So we built that. But he kicked the plans out real quick. So we weren't too late. So it was, we had a great working relationship. Those of you who were in town when we saw the steel go up, it was probably unique, you probably never saw it before, the green steel. And that was, because that was going to be roughly the final color of steel, as long as you're paying $100,000 to have the steel painted. And most people don't paint the steel, at least in the back house, in the common areas that cover drywalls. But we had so much exposed steel that I elected to have painted the primer coat, the same as the finish coat, so that we have a little excitement as we were building the thing on. The steel and the skylights were long lead items, which means that we bid those are designed first, we bid those and then assign them to the general contractor. As the major department stores came in, we had to bring them in to meet with Don, get his blessing. The city council reserves, as they do today, the right to reserve, to review and approve, at least architecturally, all the buildings that go in the city. They don't allow striped awnings and that sort of thing. Fortunately, we didn't have any of those. One of the interesting things is when we're building our centers, because they are so unique and we spend so much on the design that we don't allow anyone to take photographs while we're building. We hired the Palm Beach Gardens Police Department to be on site after hours and on weekends. It was an off-duty patrolman, and the city allowed him to sit in the patrol car out at the site and stop and challenge anyone who was coming in. And I remember one time when we got to the end of it, the tenants were all under construction, so we had people working Saturdays, Sundays, nights, and everything. That one Sunday afternoon, I saw a guy out there taking pictures. And I said, what are you doing here? He says, oh, I'm just touring. I said, no, you're not allowed to do this. The tenant, no, I'm just touring. I said, well, you're not allowed to. He says, okay, I'll be. I said, you have to take a film on your camera. He says, I'm not taking a film. I said, no, we don't allow you to take pictures. I said, I'm trespassing. He said, I'm not doing it, I'm leaving. He starts walking through the door, and I just got on my walkie-talkie and called the patrolman. He was right there at the door. He said, you take the film out of the camera, give it to Mr. Carnes, or I'll handcuff you and take you to jail for trespassing. That was the end of that.
Does anybody ever copy your mall?
Yeah, there's one of these, not this, but the Mall of Money in Orlando. There's the identical thing in Turkey. Someone sent me a picture of it, I can't believe it. I mean, the materials aren't as good as what we use, but the whole concept is identical. To get back to the landscape, we talked about the 260 Canary Island day palms. Those were not only for the mall, they were also for all the intersections around the regional center. We had 20,000 annuals that were planted on the mall site, and roughly another 2,000 other trees, thousands and thousands of shrubs. The mall won the National Nurserymen's Association Award, and Forbes and John Wisner, landscape architect, went to the White House and got that award from Marvin Bush. Leasing, our original estimate was based on about a 2,000 square foot tenant that would have 180 inline tenants plus the food court tenants. One of the things that keeps me busy and the people that work for me busy is showing all these spaces to prospective tenants. Do they come out, what's that gonna look like? I wanna be at the top of the escalator, not where the escalator's going down. And that sort of thing. We've got these, the tenant contractors working out there, thousands of contractors. And you've got to have security people there because they'll steal the drywall and metal studs from each other at night. You know, they can't get it quick enough, and they just want to keep going because they're under pressure that we get it done. So they'll steal materials from them, and they'll hire people away from them, and that sort of thing. It's tough, but the tenant mix that we opened with was very, very few of those tenants left. We opened with, our goal was to have about 25% local tenants and very few external. And then from there, our tenant mix has kind of evolved. If we find tenants that aren't, their sales aren't up to where we think they should be, we'll encourage them to move on and, try to renegotiate their lease or get them to move out. Because the way that the shopping centers are evaluated is your sales per square foot, what you're selling per square foot. And if they're not doing our mean average, then we really don't want them to get someplace. Because our goal is to get as many people in the center as possible and generate sales for all our tenants. And that's what we're doing now. In a moment here, we're going to show the last tape here. And what you'll see in there is at the grand opening is we got an unveiling of the art. We've got the sculptures in the center, and we bought those before there was a code or a requirement for art in public places. And Ford's idea was that there should, in all our buildings, we put major pieces of art because we believe that people should be exposed to art in their lives, and particularly the young people should be exposed to it. And we do get a lot of young people involved, and hopefully they're picking up something. We're going to talk about the check that we gave to after the grand opening, a check for the Palm Beach Council of the Arts for $60,000, which was matched by a lot of other people. I think it ultimately generated about $300,000 20 years ago to the Palm Beach County Council of the Arts. We'll talk about the big band that we had there, the local fellow that was the head of the big bands, and George Benson, and a couple of his songs were out at the time. It's Kisses in the Moonlight and Nothing Gonna Change My Love for You. I had to look that up. You'll see the Panther that we used in I'm assuming Rick can get this going. The Panther that we used in our early advertising, some of you that were around see that, the Macy's Parade with Robin Leach.
Oh, yes. Mr. Flake.
Remember some of that. And today we continue to win marketing awards, and we keep improving the center. We now have a security staff of 44 with 6 security vehicles plus 2 bicycles. We have 60 closer TV cameras on site, and we monitor all those individually from our report from our security office. And we continue to partner with the city and local charities because as we promised you 23 years ago, we were
This
your
scroll
neighbor.
forward.
We like to think we've lived up to our part of the deal. Thank you.
Push play, Rick, and then fast forward.
Tom, tell me when to stop.
Oh. We had a ways to go.
She still has to finish dinner.
This is about as high-tech as I get.
Now it's the end of that one.
No,
No,
yeah.
that's fine.
You gotta keep going. I think it's got more of your sit talking. The other one starts.
Do you know what the final amount was that to be overall the expense of it?
That was, that we spent building it all?
I know you said one was, the roads were $1 million, did you say? Or was that?
Yeah, we did about, it's the one after.
Is this it, Tom?
There you go.
That's it,
Yeah,
right?
there you go.
Okay.
Sound.
Sound of what?
That's the Marshall Grand Band.
Tom Beecher.
on Beach.
But it's more. Washington did.
No, okay.
That it?
Got it, Dan?
I had?
Got it, Dan? Yeah.
Oh, I bet the beginning.
And we're not supposed to have this. We have to discuss it.
There's Sleaton dinner again.
This is part of it.
Well,
I
ladies and
apologize.
gentlemen,
I thought this was a PowerPoint presentation. It's not.
we had trouble with this last night too.
Yeah, it'll work for if you put it on the machine, not on the remote, just the remote, just get it play. When you play and
An attorney, a planner, and a builder trying to get the.
we had the action.
See, I did this yesterday though.
Yeah, just like that, just keep skipping.
Who did it yesterday? We're gonna do it again.
Forbes Cohen property for more than a quarter of a century. With a past successes, corporate headquarters are populated, current can boast
Oh, I don't remember seeing that. Again and again. We'll remember it by heart. Couple more times so we
Here we go.
can recite.
Yeah, but I want,
Keep skipping, Rick.
okay, but I
Yeah,
want
one more.
Skip one more.
There you go. Try this. No, this is it.
to, right here?
I think this is it.
Wow.
There we go.
This was the pre-opening ad.
Oh, the famous Bernard's palm tree.
And this was filmed in the mall.
The temple by the theater?
By Bernard.
By Vernon.
The gardens of Palm Beaches. Let the game begin. Grand opening, 10 a.m.